Picture the top of an Olympic ski jump ramp. The wind is, well, it's howling up there on the mountain.
Oh, yeah. Brutally cold.
Exactly. And the athlete stepping up to the starting bar is wearing boots so ridiculously oversized that he's actually had to stuff them with like 6 pairs of socks just to keep them from falling off.
It's just terrifying when you think about what he's about to do.
Right. And he's wearing these severe thick lens glasses that are completely fogging up under his pink goggles. So he is practically blind.
Yeah, definitely blind.
And on top of that, he is over 20 pounds heavier than anyone else competing. But he is about to become the defining face of the 1988 Winter Olympics in Calgary. Not by winning, but by finishing dead last.
It's an image that just completely shatters our modern understanding of what an elite athlete is supposed to look like.
Yeah, totally.
We're so conditioned to expect pure, uncompromising optimization. We expect years of highly specialized training, custom engineered gear.
Tested in wind tunnels and all that.
Exactly. Entire teams of dietitians and sports psychologists. It's this realm of absolute perfectionism where the margin between immortal glory and being completely forgotten is like a fraction of a second.
But today, we're exploring what the world's most famous last-place finisher can actually teach you about resilience, identity, and the sheer psychology of trying.
It's such a great topic.
It really is. Our guide for this deep dive is this really insightful document titled What a Boarder Can Learn from Eddie Edwards by Richard Armstrong. It's from the Boardership Clatted 360 series.
Yeah, and the author takes the story of this working-class plasterer who basically hijacked the Winter Olympics, and he applies it to the intense pressures of student life.
But I mean, the framework he builds applies perfectly to the professional and personal pressures that, all of us face every single day.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, let's unpack this. How does a guy with no funding, borrowed equipment, and seemingly zero natural talent for his chosen event manage to become an absolute legend?
Well, to understand that, we have to recognize that this isn't a story about sporting triumph in the traditional gold medal sense.
Right.
It's really a masterclass in the sheer courage of taking action when the outcome is guaranteed to be a failure.
Which is so rare.
It is. It requires stripping away our cultural obsession with winning and just, examining what happens when someone simply decides to show up in an arena they supposedly have no business being in.
And to see how he showed up, we really have to look at the trajectory he was supposed to be on. Michael David Edwards, or, well, Eddie, was just a nickname given to him by his school friends.
Based on his last name, right?
Yeah, exactly. He was born in December 1963 in Cheltenham, and his path wasn't just set, it was practically cemented. I mean, his father was a plasterer, his grandfather was a plasterer, his great-grandfather was a plasterer.
That is a very clear, heavy generational weight.
Oh, massive.
He was fully expected to just pick up a trowel, stay in his lane, and follow right in their footsteps. And for the early part of his life, there was really no indication he would do anything else.
Until a school trip completely derails that plan. At age 13, he goes to Andalo, Italy, in the Dolomites.
Nice.
Yeah, he tries skiing for the first time, and it just flips a switch in his brain. He comes back home to England completely hooked. So he starts training relentlessly at the Gloucester Ski and Snowboard Center.
Which, we should point out, is just a dry ski slope.
Yeah, less than 10 miles from his house.
And we really should clarify the intensity of this pursuit, because his goal became representing Great Britain in alpine downhill skiing at the Olympics.
Right.
And he funded everything himself through his plastering work. The source material highlights this gritty reality.
Yeah.
I mean, he is traveling across Europe trying to compete, but because he lacks the deep pockets of the traditional ski establishment, he's sleeping in cars, sleeping in barns. At his lowest points, he is literally scavenging food from bins just to survive while chasing this dream.
That level of physical and financial sacrifice is staggering. You'd think that kind of movie script dedication would eventually pay off, right?
You'd hope so.
But the Great Britain alpine ski selectors look at his times, they look at his background, and they just flatly reject him.
Ouch.
Yeah, they tell him he simply isn't good enough to make the alpine team. And for most people, that rejection is the end of the road. You pack up your skis, you go back to Cheltenham, and you pick up the trowel.
Because that is the logical stopping point. I mean, he was fighting against athletes who had been groomed for the sport since toddlerhood.
Right, athletes with massive financial backing.
State-sponsored training programs, everything. Commitment is essential, but commitment cannot magically bridge a massive gap in technical capability and funding.
Yeah, that's fair.
So he accepted that he couldn't beat them at alpine skiing. But he didn't accept that his Olympic dream was over.
which leads to a pivot that I find absolutely brilliant from a strategic
That
perspective.
was amazing.
In the business world, there's this concept called the blue ocean strategy. A red ocean is a market full of sharks fighting over the same small prey. The water is bloody with competition.
Like alpine skiing.
Exactly. Alpine skiing was a red ocean.
Yeah.
But a blue ocean is when you find a space with zero competition. You sail away and invent a brand new market where you are the only player.
Right.
Eddie looks at the landscape of British winter sports and realizes there are literally zero British ski jumpers. Not one.
It's crazy.
So if he just switches sports to ski jumping, he doesn't have to beat a single fellow countryman. He becomes the default national team. Now, reading this, I have to ask you, is Eddie's pivot here a sign of deep delusion, or is it absolute strategic genius?
Oh, I'd say it is an act of supreme pragmatism.
Yeah.
Definitely. He recognized the structural rules of the game and found a loophole. He realized that the alpine market was a red ocean guarded by subjective gatekeepers.
Those selectors who just didn't like his style or his background.
Exactly. But the ski jumping blue ocean, however, was guarded only by a spreadsheet. If you could hit the minimum qualifying distance set by the International Federation, the British Olympic Committee would be obligated to send him.
Because there was literally no one else to send.
Exactly.
So he packs up and moves to Lake Placid, New York, to train for ski jumping under two coaches, John Viscombe and Chuck Berghorn. And this is where the sheer physical reality of what he's attempting becomes almost comical.
The physical disadvantages cannot be overstated here. Ski jumping is entirely a sport of aerodynamics. The athletes essentially act as human airfoils.
Right.
They need to be as light and streamlined as possible to generate lift and glide through the air. Every extra ounce of body weight requires exponentially more upward force to keep the jumper airborne.
And Eddie weighed, what, approximately 82 kilograms?
Yeah, which is over 9 kilograms heavier than the next heaviest competitor in the entire world.
He is practically a boulder trying to glide. Gravity is actively pulling him out of the sky faster than he can ever generate lift.
Precisely. And the mechanical challenges didn't even stop at his weight. Ski jumping requires incredibly precise visual targeting.
Well, yeah, you're flying through the air.
You're flying at high speeds,
Yeah.
and you need to spot your landing perfectly to avoid a catastrophic injury. But Eddie was severely long-sighted.
Right, the thick glasses.
He had to wear those thick lens glasses under his goggles. But because of the temperature differential between his body heat and the freezing mountain air, his glasses would just completely fog up.
So he is effectively jumping blind, carrying massive excess weight in borrowed boots that are several sizes too big, held on by layers of socks.
It is a total recipe for disaster. But he trains anyway. And at the 1987 World Championships in Bavaria, he manages to finish 55th in the world.
Which, I mean, sounds terrible on paper.
It does.
But that 55th place finish was exactly the mathematical threshold he needed to meet the minimum international standard. He hacked the qualification system perfectly legally.
He really did.
He officially qualified as the sole British ski jumping applicant for the 1988 Winter Olympics.
And understanding that literal uphill battle makes his arrival on the world stage even more surreal. Because hacking a spreadsheet in Bavaria is one thing.
Right.
Actually, standing at the top of an Olympic ramp in Calgary, knowing you are physically outmatched, knowing millions of people are watching, and choosing to push off anyway, it requires a totally different psychological framework.
And the atmosphere in Calgary was just a circus. He arrives at the airport, and there is this massive banner hanging up that says, "Welcome to Calgary, Eddie the Eagle."
Which is such a great nickname.
It is. But he later admitted he was looking around the terminal, wondering who this famous Eagle person was. He had no idea the Canadian media had already latched onto his story.
Oh, that's hilarious.
The nickname stuck instantly. The global press became obsessed with this short-sighted plasterer with the massive grin who was cheerfully walking into an arena of elite titans.
But, you know, the media circus couldn't change the laws of physics once the competition actually began.
No, absolutely not. Let's be very clear about the results. In the 70-meter event, he placed 58th out of 58 competitors. He was dead last.
Right.
In the 90-meter event, he also placed last. But here's where it gets really interesting. In that 70-meter event, his jump was 73.5 meters. Yes, it was last place at the Olympics. But it was simultaneously a brand new British record. A record that actually stood until the year 2001.
What's fascinating here is how Eddie completely shifted the metric of success. Richard Armstrong's source text points out something vital about human psychology.
Oh, I love this part.
If Eddie had fallen into the comparison trap, if he had compared his jumping mechanics to the athletes from Finland or Norway who had lifelong national funding and custom-built facilities,
It would have been paralyzing.
completely, he never would have pushed off the ramp.
I hear that, but I can also hear the cynics right now. Because the purists at the time argued that Eddie was basically performing a character.
Right, the goofy glasses.
Exactly. They felt he was leaning into the goofy glasses, waving to the cameras, and making a mockery of a sport that elite athletes literally dedicate their entire lives and bodies to perfect. So how does Armstrong's text defend him against the charge that this was just a giant PR stunt?
Well, by focusing on the concept of authenticity versus performance. Identity, the text argues, is built through action, not outcome. Eddie genuinely wanted to be a ski jumper.
Yeah.
He was risking his neck, literally jumping off a 90-meter ramp blind. You don't do that just for a PR stunt. The physical danger is way too real.
That's a really good point.
His benchmark wasn't the gold medalist. His benchmark was the person he was yesterday. He wasn't competing to beat the world's best. He was competing to find his own absolute personal limit. And the crowd recognized that he was genuinely giving everything he had to offer, even when he knew his best was objectively the worst in the competition.
That vulnerability is magnetic. People can spot the difference between someone who is mocking a process and someone who is earnestly participating in it despite their limitations.
Exactly.
I mean, at the closing ceremony, the president of the International Olympic Committee, Juan Antonio Samaranch, stood up and delivered a line that went down in history. He said to the athletes, "At Calgary, some of you have even soared like an eagle."
And the crowd just went wild.
Erupted. 100,000 people. Even the chairman of the Calgary Organizing Committee mentioned him by name in his closing address.
Highlighting the athlete who finished last in every event is almost unheard of in elite sports.
Totally.
But they did it because Eddie tapped into something that resonated far beyond the technicalities of ski jumping. We remember his effort vividly, while most of us would struggle to name the unknown gold medalists of those exact same games.
The effort became the victory. But the aftermath of Calgary is where this story turns into a wild, chaotic ride. Because fame hits him like a freight train and the establishment strikes back.
The public infatuation was immediate and overwhelming.
We're talking massive appearance fees, tabloid headlines, advertising deals. He even flies to Finland and records a pop single called Minimeni on Itu, which translates to "My Name is Eddie."
I still can't believe that actually happened.
It reached #2 in the Finnish charts. He ended up singing it in front of 70,000 people at a rock festival near Helsinki, and he didn't even speak Finnish.
Wait, really?
Yeah, he just learned the lyrics phonetically by ear.
It sounds like a dream scenario, but behind the scenes, the institutions of the sporting world were watching this unfold, and they were, well, far less amused by the spectacle.
They're furious. The establishment gatekeepers decided to rewrite the rules to ensure this could never happen again.
Right.
In 1990, the IOC introduces a new regulation that becomes informally known in the sports world as the Eddie the Eagle rule. Suddenly, to compete in the Olympics, an athlete had to rank in the top 30% of an international competition or be within the top 50 competitors globally.
It was a bureaucratic wall erected specifically to close the blue ocean he had found.
And the wall held. It effectively banned him from the 92 games in Albertville, the 94 games in Lillehammer, and the 98 games in Nagano.
Which is just heartbreaking.
Reading this section of the source material makes me incredibly frustrated on behalf of anyone who loves a good underdog story. It feels like these institutions actively punished him for being popular, for showing up their polished, optimized athletes.
Yeah.
How do you endure that? When the literal rules of your sport are rewritten just to exclude you, how does someone not just give up and become deeply, permanently bitter?
It's a completely natural reaction to feel that frustration, and honestly, many people would have let that bitterness consume them. But this is where the source text pulls out its most powerful psychological lesson.
Okay.
Resilience is not some innate magical quality you are simply born with. It is not a personality trait. It is a mechanical skill. And like any skill, it is built through the repetition of encountering a barrier and actively choosing a new direction.
The repetition of getting knocked down and finding a different way to stand back up.
Exactly. Eddie spent years being rejected. First by the Alpine selectors, then by funding bodies, and eventually by the IOC itself. But notice the pattern here.
Yeah.
Every single setback redirected him. It never defined him. And we see this skill tested to its absolute limit shortly after the Olympic doors closed, when his financial life completely unraveled.
Yes. In 1991, his trust fund collapsed. The money he had earned from his post-Olympic fame was mismanaged by the trustees he had hired to protect it.
Awful.
He lost his money and had to declare bankruptcy. Going from global fame to bankruptcy in 3 years is a whiplash that would break most people.
But look at the mechanism of how he responded. He didn't just wallow in the unfairness of the betrayal, he weaponized his situation.
This is wild.
He enrolls at De Montfort University in Leicester to study law. He doesn't just hire a new lawyer, he spends years studying, graduates with a law degree in 2003, and then uses his own legal knowledge to sue the trustees who lost his money.
That is unbelievable. He clawed back a £100,000 settlement. He literally became a lawyer to fight his own injustice.
Oh.
That isn't just a pivot, that is unstoppable drive.
It is the habit of resilience applied to a completely non-athletic arena.
And his physical pursuits didn't stop either. He couldn't jump in the Olympics, so he went into amateur speed skiing and became world number 9, hitting speeds of 106.8 miles per hour.
Insane.
He set a world stunt record for jumping over 6 buses. He became a ski instructor, a motivational speaker, and a charity ambassador. And then he achieves the ultimate cultural victory. In 2016, a massive Hollywood biopic is made about his life.
Such a fun movie, too.
Taron Egerton plays him, Hugh Jackman plays his fictionalized coach, and the film grosses over $46 million worldwide.
He took every closed door and simply built a new building next to it.
Yeah.
Which really brings us to the core reason Richard Armstrong wrote this piece, is specifically who he was writing it for.
Right. This is a crucial pivot in the source material. Armstrong wrote this text for students living in boarding schools. He points out that a boarding house is a very unique, intense psychological environment.
Definitely.
It is a physical fishbowl of constant, highly visible comparison. Everyone in your dorm knows your academic results, your sporting failures are public, your social status is on display at every single meal, in the common room, every weekend. There is nowhere to hide.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Armstrong is using the boarding school as a microcosm for modern adult life. Because we all live in a fishbowl now.
We really do.
We all face that constant, visible comparison, whether it's in an open-plan corporate office, within our professional networks on LinkedIn, or endlessly scrolling through the curated lives of our peers on social media.
We carry the boarding school dining hall around in our pockets.
And because of that intense visibility, the temptation is always to wait. The fear of public failure paralyzes us. We wait until we feel we are good enough, or ready enough, or perfectly polished before we try something new.
Yeah, holding off on applying for that promotion.
Or starting a creative project, or speaking up in a meeting, because we are terrified of looking foolish in front of our peers. We don't want to finish 58th out of 58 while everyone is watching.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? I think it demands that we calculate the invisible cost of not trying. Eddie Edwards proves that courage has to come before talent. If you wait for the talent to be perfected before you act, the opportunity simply passes you by. He didn't wait to be ready. He didn't wait to have the right boots or the right weight or the approval of the selectors. He just went.
He is a direct challenge to our modern instinct to hide our works in progress. The students in those boarding schools and the colleagues in our workplaces who are ultimately remembered and respected aren't always the ones who scored the highest grades or achieved the fastest promotions.
Right.
They are remembered for how they responded to difficulty. Character isn't an outcome you achieve. It's a practice you engage in daily, publicly, without the armor of guaranteed success.
It's the practice of showing up in the borrowed boots. Because if we summarize the absolute uniqueness of this story, we're talking about a guy who trained with equipment that didn't fit in a sport he barely knew, eating out of bins and sleeping in barns. He went to the Olympics, he finished dead last, and yet he became immortalized because he embodied what the founder of the modern Olympics, Pierre de Coubertin, actually originally envisioned. De Coubertin famously said, "The essential thing in life is not the triumph, but the struggle. The essential thing is not to have conquered, but to have fought well."
It's a quote that has become a bit of a cliche over the decades, usually printed on motivational posters. But Eddie gave those words their original meaning back.
He really did.
He breathed life into a spirit that had been suffocated by optimization. And the ultimate question that Armstrong's text leaves for its readers, and that we leave for you, is quite simple. Are you brave enough to jump? Life gives you the ramp every single day.
It really does. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over today, something that really struck me about how the IOC reacted with that Eddie the Eagle rule.
Okay.
In our modern lives, we are completely surrounded by algorithms and institutional metrics that demand perfection. They demand optimization.
Oh, everywhere you look.
Right. We are told constantly by business gurus and social media algorithms to find our niche, to only play games we are mathematically guaranteed to win, to curate our personal brand so we never look foolish. But by creating our own personal Eddie the Eagle rules, by refusing to participate in anything unless we know we can rank in the top percentile, are we accidentally robbing ourselves of the sheer life-affirming joy of simply being brave enough to finish last?
It's a powerful question to reflect on. Sometimes the greatest victory is just refusing to be embarrassed by your own effort.
Refusing to be embarrassed by your own effort. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Whatever your blue ocean is, whatever your ramp looks like today, we hope you find the courage to jump. Catch you next time.